Welcome back to John Chat. Let's chat with John. It's our 19th episode, and I'm Professor John from National Taiwan Normal University.
Great to be here.
Today we're doing something a little different. Yeah, we're diving into some fascinating stories and legends from Japanese history.
Sounds fun.
And it's going to feel like we're just hanging out with friends.
Just chatting about Japan.
Exactly. If you want to see visuals while we chat,
you can check out our YouTube live stream.
This is actually the second episode
of our special series
called Yi-Wei Comes to Chat.
That's right.
Yi-Wei, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. It's always great to be here.
Especially when we're talking about Japanese history.
Definitely.
Okay, let's dive in.
Let's do it.
We're focusing on the Sengoku period in Japan.
The Warring States period?
Yeah, think samurai castles, epic battles.
And tons of power struggles.
You're going to explore the personalities of three major players.
From that time.
Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu.
A fascinating trio.
Each of these guys had a totally different approach to leadership.
It's fascinating to see how their personalities shaped Japanese history.
There's a great analogy to illustrate their leadership styles.
It involves a bush warbler on a tree.
Ooh, I love analogies.
Tell me more.
Lay it on me.
Imagine a bush warbler.
Okay.
Perched on a branch, refusing to sing.
Okay.
Nobunaga was a fierce warrior.
I see.
He'd be the type to beat the bird till it sings.
So definitely not the patient type.
Not at all.
Okay.
Now contrast that with Hideyoshi.
Okay.
He was incredibly cunning and strategic.
Okay.
He'd be the one to entice the bird to sing.
Oh, through manipulation and diplomacy.
Instead of brute force, he was all about outsmarting his opponents.
Interesting. Okay, I'm seeing the difference.
Good.
So what about Ieyasu? Where does he fit into this?
Ieyasu represents the wait for the bird to sing approach.
Okay.
He was a master of patience and observation.
I see.
He believed in biding his time.
Okay.
Carefully analyzing his rival's weaknesses, and then seizing the perfect moment to strike.
Interesting. So he was gathering information and building alliances?
Strategically positioning himself for success.
Okay. I'm starting to understand the three ways to make the bird sing.
Three very different approaches.
But they all led to major shifts in power during that period.
That's right.
Now I'm really curious about Hideyoshi.
His rise to power is a total underdog story.
He started as a peasant, the son of a foot soldier.
And somehow managed to unify Japan.
It's incredible. How did he pull that off?
Well, part of his success can be attributed to his incredible ability to seize opportunities.
Okay.
A pivotal moment was the Hanjiji incident.
Okay.
This involved the betrayal and death of Oda Nobunaga.
Betrayal and death.
Orchestrated by one of his own generals, Akechi Mitsuhide.
Wait, one of Nobunaga's own guys turned against him?
That's right.
That's intense.
Right.
So did Hideyoshi just take advantage of the chaos?
It's not quite that clear-cut. There's no hard evidence. But some historians speculate that Hideyoshi might have known about the plot beforehand.
Ooh, now that's interesting. A little conspiracy.
Always adds another layer to history.
So what makes historians think that?
It's mainly based on the speed and decisiveness with which Hideyoshi acted.
Okay.
He immediately went after Mitsuhide, defeated him, avenged Nobunaga.
Wow.
And then skillfully positioned himself as the successor.
Wow, that's some strategic thinking.
Indeed.
So he takes over, but unifying a nation full of ambitious samurai.
Can't be easy.
How does he maintain control?
Hideyoshi was a pragmatist.
Okay.
He knew he needed to keep those samurai occupied.
To prevent them from challenging his authority.
Exactly.
So what did he do?
He sent them off to invade Korea.
Whoa. Talk about a bold move. Was conquering Korea his ultimate goal?
Not really.
Oh, wow.
Some historical accounts suggest that his true ambition was to conquer China.
With Korea as a stepping stone.
That's right.
Wow, so this guy had his sights set on dominating Asia.
It's a classic rise to power story with some real Shakespearean drama.
Totally. Okay, now I want to talk about Hideyoshi's son, Hideyori.
And this mysterious Hideyori's tree behind Osaka Castle.
What's the story there?
To understand the tree, we need to understand Hideyori's mother.
Cha-Cha.
Also known as Lady Yodo.
All right, let's dive into the family drama. Tell me about Cha-Cha.
Cha-Cha came from a powerful family. She was the niece of Oda Nobunaga.
Right, the one who was betrayed and killed.
Exactly.
She had a complicated history with Hideyoshi.
To say the least.
And here's where things get even more interesting.
Cha-Cha ended up marrying Hideyoshi.
The very man responsible for the deaths of her father and stepfather.
That's right.
Wow, talk about a tangled web of relationships.
It definitely raises some questions about her true feelings for Hideyoshi.
Was this a marriage of convenience? A power play?
Or was there something more?
It's a question historians still debate today.
It gives us a glimpse into the complexities of power, family, and personal relationships in that era.
Okay, I'm hooked. So how does this all tie back to the mysterious tree?
Well, picture this. Okay. Hideyoshi, a man in his late 50s with a harem of 3,000 women.
3,000?
Finally has an heir, Hideyori.
Okay, wow, that's a lot of pressure.
It certainly is. But here's where the gossipy side of history comes in.
Okay.
There's a theory.
Okay.
And it's based on legends and speculation.
What is it?
That Hideyori might not actually be Hideyoshi's biological son.
Wait, seriously? Okay, now you have my full attention.
Tell me more about this theory.
Okay.
Remember Chacha's lineage?
And her complicated feelings for Hideyoshi?
Yes. Well, those factors, combined with rumors of her alleged affairs,
have fueled speculation for centuries.
Exactly.
Wow, it's like a real-life soap opera set in feudal Japan.
That's a good way to put it.
So where does the tree come in?
The Hideyori's tree is said to be connected to all of this speculation.
Okay, so how does a tree fit into all of this?
It's believed that the tree was planted around the time of Hideyori's birth.
Okay.
And its unusual location behind Osaka Castle
has fueled all sorts of rumors and legends.
That's right. Some believe it was a symbol of Hideyoshi's hopes for his son.
I see.
While others whisper that it was a secret meeting place for Chacha and her alleged lovers.
Wow. So this tree is like a silent witness
to all the drama and intrigue surrounding Hideyori's parentage.
This is incredible. Okay, so what happens next in this saga?
What becomes of Hideyori?
Right.
Well, unfortunately, Hideyoshi's death sets the stage for even more turmoil.
Oh, no.
Knowing his time was limited, Hideyoshi entrusted the care of his young son to 5 of his most trusted generals.
Known as the 5 Elders.
That's right.
I have a bad feeling about this.
It sounds like a recipe for conflict.
It does.
And among those 5 elders was none other than Tokugawa Ieyasu.
The wait for the bird to sing guy.
Precisely.
So his time finally comes.
It does. And with Hideyoshi gone, Ieyasu starts making his move.
Okay, how so?
He orchestrates this brilliant, albeit ruthless power play by marrying his granddaughter to young Hideyori.
On the surface, it seems like a gesture of unity and peace.
But I'm guessing there's more to it
than meets the eye.
Exactly. Yeah. He was playing the long game.
So what was his real game plan?
By marrying into the family, Ieyasu gained a foothold within the ruling clan, all while secretly consolidating his own power base.
I see.
He understood that true power comes from knowing when not to act.
Okay.
And he was carefully positioning himself.
For the moment when he could seize control.
Precisely.
That's seriously cunning. So for a while, it seems like things are stable.
But that facade of peace
doesn't last forever.
You're right. The turning point comes when Hideyori reaches the age of 19. Ieyasu, who had been carefully observing
his young rival,
starts to see him as a legitimate threat.
I can see where this is going.
Ieyasu's not going to let anyone jeopardize his ambitions.
So what does he do?
He realizes it's time to act. And the Battle of Osaka becomes the stage for their final showdown.
But how does he justify attacking his own grandson-in-law?
That seems like a pretty blatant power grab.
It does.
He needed a pretext. And being the master strategist that he was. Ieyasu found one. Remember that temple Hideyoshi had built?
With all that money, he prevented Hideyori from using for military purposes.
That's the one.
What about it?
Well, Ieyasu seized upon an inscription on the temple that contained his name and twisted its meaning.
Oh, how so?
He claimed it was evidence that Hideyori was planning a rebellion.
Wow. Talk about grasping at straws. But I guess in the game of power,
perception is everything.
So the Battle of Osaka becomes inevitable.
It does.
What happens next in this clash of titans?
On one side, you have Ieyasu, the seasoned strategist with a powerful army. On the other, you have Hideyori. The young, charismatic leader with a fierce defender by his side. Sanada Yukimura.
Wait, Sanada Yukimura? This is the first time we're hearing his name?
It is.
Who is this legendary warrior?
Yukimura is one of the most fascinating figures of the Sengoku period.
Really?
He was known for his incredible bravery.
I see.
Tactical brilliance and loyalty to the Toyotomi clan.
So he's like Hideyori's right-hand man?
His ultimate protector.
Interesting. And his story?
Adds this whole layer of romance and tragedy.
Ooh. I'm always up for a bit of romantic tragedy.
Tell me more. Well, remember all that speculation about Hideyori's parentage?
Yes.
Some believe that Yukimura might actually be his real father.
No way! Are you serious?
I am.
So he might have been fighting to protect his own son.
It's a theory based on circumstantial evidence and the whispers of history.
Okay.
But it adds another layer of depth to his unwavering loyalty and fierce defense of Osaka Castle.
So what happened?
He made a heroic last stand, leading a desperate charge against Ieyasu's forces.
Against all odds.
It was a scene straight out of a samurai epic.
So what happened?
Though he was ultimately defeated, his courage and unwavering spirit cemented his place as a legendary warrior.
It sounds heartbreaking, but also incredibly inspiring.
It is. Yukimura's story embodies the loser's aesthetic.
Okay.
This fascinating idea in Japanese culture.
About what?
About finding beauty and meaning in defeat.
Okay.
It's about acknowledging the struggle.
The sacrifice.
And the honor in fighting for a cause, even if you know you might not win.
It's a powerful concept.
It is.
It reminds me of the kamikaze pilots of World War II.
Sacrificing themselves for what they believed in.
Even when facing impossible odds.
You've hit upon a really interesting connection.
Yeah.
Yukimura's story, even though it took place centuries earlier, echoes that same sense of self-sacrifice and devotion to a cause.
Even in the face of certain defeat.
Exactly.
It's a legacy that has clearly resonated throughout Japanese history.
Indeed.
Now, I know you mentioned earlier that Yukimura's story also ties back to the Battle of Sekigahara.
The battle that divided Japan into East and West.
Can you tell me more about that?
Absolutely. His family, the Sanada clan, had this incredibly clever strategy for survival during those turbulent times.
Oh, really? What was it?
They strategically aligned themselves on both sides of the conflict at Sekigahara.
Wait, so they hedged their bets?
Precisely.
That's ingenious. No matter who won.
The Sanada clan would have a foothold in the new power structure?
Exactly. It was a brilliant display of political maneuvering.
It shows how survival often depended on adaptability and strategic foresight during this era.
Wow, these stories are full of twists and turns. I'm starting to understand the complexities of this period.
And how everything is interconnected.
That's the beauty of history.
It's not just about memorizing dates and names.
But about understanding the motivations, the strategies, and the human stories that shape the course of events.
Exactly.
It's those human stories that make history come alive.
I couldn't agree more.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about these three incredible figures, their distinct leadership styles,
and how their actions shaped Japanese history.
Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, are there any final thoughts you want to share?
About these 3 ways to make the birds sing.
It's such a powerful analogy.
It is.
It highlights how there are multiple paths to achieving a goal.
Sometimes it takes force.
Sometimes cunning.
And sometimes, as we saw with Ieyasu,
it's all about patience and observation.
He wasn't passively waiting.
He was actively gathering information.
And positioning himself for the perfect moment to act.
It's an important reminder that true power comes from knowing when to hold back.
And when to make your move.
And it makes you think about how these approaches might apply to our own lives, doesn't it?
It does.
When do we need to be assertive? When is it better to be strategic?
And when is patience the key to success?
It's a fascinating question.
For our listeners to ponder.
Absolutely. We've extracted some really valuable insights
from these historical tales.
But the story doesn't end here.
We'll pick up next time.
With Ieyasu's consolidation of power and the dawn of the Tokugawa shogunate.
Stay tuned for more fascinating deep dives into Japanese history.
And don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to check out the visuals we have for this episode.
Until next time.
See you then.
It's incredible how Ieyasu was able to use a temple inscription to manipulate the situation.
And justify his actions.
It really highlights the power of narrative.
And how history is often shaped by those who win.
Absolutely. Speaking of shaping history, let's get back to Hideyori. And see how his story ends.
Okay.
Despite Yukimura's efforts, Osaka Castle eventually falls.
The Ieyasu's forces.
That's right. The patient bird finally gets his worm, as they say.
But what happened to Hideyori? Did he manage to escape?
Sadly, no. Hideyori, along with his mother, Chacha, chose a dramatic end.
Oh.
They committed suicide rather than being captured by Ieyasu.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. It adds a whole other layer of tragedy to this story.
It does, and it solidified Ieyasu's control.
So with the Toyotomi line gone,
he was free to establish the Tokugawa shogunate
and usher in an era of peace and stability.
That would last for over 250 years.
2.5 centuries. That's an incredibly long time. What were some of the key changes that Ieyasu implemented?
That led to such a stable period. Well, Ieyasu was a brilliant politician and administrator. He understood that to maintain peace,
he needed to create a system
balanced the power of the samurai with the need for a strong centralized government.
Okay.
It wasn't just about military might.
He needed a more comprehensive approach to governing.
Exactly. One of his most significant moves was establishing a new capital city in Edo.
Which we now know as Tokyo.
That's right, by moving away from the traditional seat of power in Kyoto.
He signaled a clear break from the past.
And asserted his authority as the new leader of Japan.
That's a really symbolic gesture. It's like he was creating a fresh start.
Leaving behind the chaos of the warring states, period.
But how did he deal with the powerful samurai families?
The daimyo.
Who were used to having a lot of autonomy.
He was very strategic about that.
Oh, so?
Ieyasu implemented a system called Senkin Kotai, which required the daimyo to spend every other year in Edo at his court.
Oh, so he could keep a close eye on them.
And prevent them from amassing too much power in their own domains.
That's brilliant, like a system of checks and balances.
To prevent any one group from becoming too powerful.
But didn't that create a lot of resentment?
Among the daimyo?
Being forced to leave their homes and families?
There was definitely some resistance at first.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But Ieyasu also understood the importance of stability and order.
After decades of warfare.
Exactly. He created a very strict social hierarchy.
With the samurai at the top.
Followed by farmers, artisans, and merchants.
Where everyone knew their place.
This system, while rigid, brought a level of predictability and structure to Japanese society.
So after decades of war, this structure
provided much-needed stability.
It's fascinating how he was able to balance these different elements.
Control and stability, tradition and change.
He also knew that a thriving society
would be less likely to rebel.
So in addition to these political and social reforms,
Ieyasu encouraged the development of arts and culture.
Oh, okay, like what?
He supported traditional forms like kabuki theater and no drama.
But also encouraged new forms of artistic expression.
That's right. This period saw the rise of ukiyo-e woodblock prints.
Depicting everything from landscapes to scenes of everyday life.
It was a time of great artistic flourishing.
That's incredible. It's like all that pent-up energy.
From the warring states period.
Found a new outlet.
In creative expression.
It reminds me of the saying, make art not war.
Exactly. And this artistic outpouring wasn't limited to the elite.
Oh.
It permeated all levels of society.
So even the common people
found ways to express themselves.
Through traditional crafts, folk tales, or local festivals.
Yes. This period gave birth to a distinct Japanese aesthetic.
That we still recognize today.
One that values harmony, respect for nature, and a deep appreciation for beauty.
It's remarkable how all of these elements came together to create a truly unique culture.
It is.
It's fascinating how these seemingly disparate elements,
a strict social order,
and an explosion of artistic creativity,
were able to coexist.
It speaks to the complexity of human societies, wouldn't you say?
I would. Even within rigid structures,
yeah,
there's always room for creativity and innovation to emerge.
It's like the human spirit finding a way to express itself.
No matter the constraints.
It makes you wonder, though, was there any pushback against this rigid social hierarchy?
Did people ever question their assigned roles?
Yeah.
There were certainly tensions and challenges.
Oh, like what?
As the merchant class grew in wealth and influence, they began to chafe against the restrictions placed upon them.
That makes sense. And the samurai,
who were at the top of the hierarchy,
faced their own struggles.
As the long era of peace meant that their martial skills were no longer in high demand.
That makes sense. It must have been difficult for a warrior class to find their place.
In a society that was no longer defined by constant warfare.
Exactly. And these simmering tensions
would eventually contribute to the decline of the Tokugawa shogunate.
Centuries later.
But for the time being, Ieyasu had created a system
that brought peace and prosperity to Japan.
And his legacy as a brilliant leader and strategist would endure.
Okay, we've talked about Ieyasu's rise to power.
And the establishment of the Tokugawa shogunate.
What about the other two figures?
Oda Nobunaga and Toyotomi Hideyoshi.
What became of their legacies?
Even though they met violent ends, both Nobunaga and Hideyoshi are still remembered as pivotal figures in Japanese history.
They are.
They're often called the unifiers.
Because they laid the groundwork for Ieyasu's ultimate victory.
That's right.
So even though they didn't achieve the final goal of unification themselves,
their contributions are still acknowledged.
Absolutely. Each of them in their own way.
Paved the way for a unified Japan.
So how do they do that?
Nobunaga, with his relentless ambition and military prowess, shattered the old order. And began the process of consolidation. Hideyoshi, through his cunning and strategic brilliance, continued that process and brought most of Japan under his control.
And Ieyasu was able to capitalize on their efforts.
And finally achieve lasting peace and stability.
It's like a relay race with each runner passing the baton,
ultimately leading to a shared victory.
It shows that even rivals can contribute to a larger goal,
even if they don't always see eye to eye.
That's a great analogy. And it all started with that simple question.
How do you make a bird sing?
It's amazing how such a simple question can lead to such a profound exploration of history and human nature.
It really is. And I'm sure our listeners are eager to learn more
about this transformative period in Japanese history.
They are.
Absolutely. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
okay,
what were some key takeaways that stood out to you?
Anything that really resonated?
Yeah.
For me, the concept of the loser's aesthetic,
which we talked about with Sanada Yukimura,
is so powerful. It's a reminder that even in defeat, there can be beauty and honor.
Okay.
It's about acknowledging the struggle, the sacrifice, the courage it takes to fight.
For what you believe in, even if you know you might not win.
It's a perspective that can be helpful in our own lives,
especially when we face setbacks or disappointments.
That's a great point. And it ties back to this idea of resilience,
which seems to be a recurring theme in these stories.
These warlords faced constant challenges, betrayals, and the threat of violence. Yet they found ways to persevere, adapt, and ultimately achieve their goals.
Their stories are incredibly inspiring.
They really are. And it speaks to the human capacity for resilience,
even in the face of seemingly impossible odds.
Another key takeaway for me is the importance of strategic thinking.
We saw how these leaders, especially Ieyasu, used cunning patience and a deep understanding of human nature
to achieve their goals. It's a reminder that sometimes the most effective approach
isn't brute force, but a carefully calculated strategy.
It's about knowing when to strike, when to wait, and when to adapt.
Absolutely. And it highlights the power of unity.
Despite their rivalries and ambitions, all three of these figures
ultimately contributed to the unification of Japan.
It shows how even those with differing viewpoints can work towards a common goal. When there's a shared need or purpose, it's a powerful message, especially today,
where it feels like division and conflict are everywhere you look.
It really is. And it reminds us that cooperation and shared goals
are essential for achieving lasting peace and stability,
no matter what challenges we face.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this episode. We've explored the lives and legacies of three major figures in Japanese history,
delved into the complexities of the warring states period,
and witnessed the rise of the Tokugawa shogunate.
But there's still more to discover.
In the next part of our deep dive,
we'll explore the cultural and social changes
that occurred during the Tokugawa period
and examine how this era continues to shape Japan today.
It's going to be a fascinating journey through history,
and I'm excited to continue exploring it with you and our listeners.
We talked about how Ieyasu fostered stability and peace during the Tokugawa shogunate, but I'm also really intrigued by this idea that it was a time of incredible cultural development.
It's true. It's fascinating how this period of strict social order also gave rise to such vibrant art, literature, and theater.
Like what?
Think about iconic Japanese art forms like woodblock prints and kabuki theater.
Oh, yeah.
They flourished during this time.
It's almost like all that energy from the warring states
was channeled into artistic expression.
I think there's something to that.
This period saw the rise of a truly distinct Japanese aesthetic.
One that's still influential today.
We see it in everything from traditional crafts to modern design.
The values of harmony, respect for nature, and a deep appreciation for beauty all have their roots in the Tokugawa period. You know, I've always associated those values with Japan.
But you never really connected them back to this specific historical era?
It makes sense, though, considering the shift from constant warfare to this more structured society.
And it's not just the arts that flourished.
Oh.
The Tokugawa period also witnessed significant advancements in science and technology,
which might seem surprising given the strict social hierarchy. And now that you mention it, I do remember reading about some technological innovations from that time.
But you always assumed they were limited.
What were some of the key breakthroughs?
Well, there were major developments in agriculture.
Okay.
Which led to increased food production and a growing population.
Okay, so how did they do that?
They developed sophisticated irrigation systems and new farming techniques,
which allowed them to cultivate more land
and produce a wider variety of crops.
And this, in turn, had a ripple effect
on the economy and social structure.
It's amazing how interconnected these developments are.
One innovation leads to another, and pretty soon the whole society is transformed.
Exactly. What else?
Another key area of progress was literacy.
Oh?
The development of woodblock printing made books more accessible.
So education and knowledge
became more widespread.
So it's not just a cultural flowering,
but a period of intellectual growth as well.
Precisely. And this intellectual curiosity
even extended to Western science and technology.
Really? Despite Japan's isolationist policies at the time.
There were strict limitations on contact with foreigners.
Right.
But it wasn't a complete shutdown.
Oh.
Some Japanese scholars managed to acquire Western texts, often through Dutch traders who were allowed limited access to Japan.
No interest.
And they started studying everything from medicine and astronomy to shipbuilding and navigation.
So even during this period of isolation, there was still a thirst for knowledge.
And a willingness to learn from other cultures.
Yes. And those seeds of Western influence planted during the Tokugawa era
would eventually blossom when Japan was forced to open its doors to the West.
In the mid-19th century.
That marked the end of the Tokugawa shogunate.
And the beginning of the Meiji Restoration.
A period of rapid modernization and industrialization.
Right. It's incredible to think about how the foundations for those dramatic changes
were laid during this seemingly isolated period.
It speaks to the enduring power of ideas and the human desire to explore and innovate.
And it highlights the interconnectedness of history.
How one era flows into the next, shaping the course of events. This whole conversation has really shifted my understanding of Japanese history. I used to think of it as a series of distinct periods.
But now you see how intertwined they really are.
And that's one of the most rewarding things about studying history, isn't it? It's not just about memorizing facts and dates.
It's about making these connections and seeing the bigger picture.
Absolutely. And speaking of the bigger picture, what are your thoughts on the lasting legacy of the Tokugawa period? How did it shape the Japan we know today?
I think its impact is undeniable. On a cultural level, many of the traditions and aesthetic values we associate with Japan have their roots in this era.
Right.
And as we discussed, it laid the groundwork for Japan's rapid modernization during the Meiji Restoration.
Okay.
The advancements in agricultural literacy and even the limited exposure to Western science and technology all played a role.
It's amazing to think how this period, which on the surface seems so different from modern Japan,
actually laid the foundation for so much of what we see today.
It's a reminder that the past is always present, shaping our world in subtle and not so subtle ways.
Exactly. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Japanese history.
I've really enjoyed exploring these stories with you.
Me too. It's been an incredible journey.
For our listeners, if you're looking for visuals to accompany this episode,
be sure to check out our YouTube channel.
And for more fascinating journeys through history and culture,
be sure to subscribe to John Chat. Let's chat with John.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought. We've talked about how the events of the past shape the present.
But we also have the power to shape the future.
So as you reflect on these stories of warlords, samurai, and the rise and fall of empires,
ask yourself, what legacy do you want to leave behind?
What actions can you take today that will ripple through time and create a better tomorrow?
Until next time.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.